Okay, we're going to look at our homework and see a couple problems that were worthy of going over together. And the first one would be number 11. Oy, oy, oy. Okay, so number 11 is asking the following. As you see, the problem is Jeremy has 18,000 at 1231 gain, 23,000 section 1231 losses. So how do we characterize these? And in essence, the question is asking for how do we categorize these after the netting process. So after the netting process, what happens is that the $18,000 gain becomes offset by the $23,000 loss, and losses are considered ordinary when they net to a loss. So since everything nets to an ordinary loss, the bottom line of this question became that it was answer. Well, let's see. You do the math yourself. If everything nets to ordinary, so answer A here becomes the correct answer because the $18,000 gain moves into the ordinary loss category. That's the idea of it. Tough problem because it's hard to understand 100% what the problem's asking the way it does ask it, but it does say the gains and losses are characterized as, and since there is a netting, that's what it's designed to teach you, is that these all net together, creating a net ordinary loss. That's the concept. Okay. Next question, 1231 section 1231, that is $16,000 loss, 1231 gain of 12,000. Again, the losses here over the gains, and there's a salary of 15,000. What is the treatment of these items in the tax return for Pierce's adjusted gross income? So the net effect, again, is that $16,000 loss, when you put it together with a $12,000 gain, is going to come to a net loss. That net loss will be $4,000. That's a long-term ordinary loss, actually, long-term ordinary loss, and that's the good news. And so that $4,000 will reduce the $50,000 salary to $46,000. It's not a capital loss, which is limited to the $3,000, and therefore the answer to this question, if we can get to the next page, which is there, the answer to that question will be, and where is the answers to those questions? It's going to be C. I think we missed A, but the AGI will be C in that case, and that's the correct answer. Next question. During the current year, we have a section 1231,000. Oh boy, let's go back. Trying to do this too fast. $30,000 section 1231 gain. That's here. 22,000 loss. Then we know that 2 years ago there was a $15,000 loss. And one of the things we said in class is that whenever you have a net gain, section 1231, and here you'll have a net gain of 8,000, you have to have that knee-jerk reaction of, do we have any prior section 1231 losses? This is the famous look-back rule. And is it within 5 years? And here it is. It's within 5 years. So what does that make the $8,000 gain? That makes the $8,000 gain ordinary income. That's what the look-back rule does. Answer C. Question 14. During the current year, George recognizes a $30,000 section 1231 gain and an $18,000 section 1231 loss. Here and here. Now what happens? Again, net the two together, you have a $12,000 gain of section 1231. Whenever you have a section 1231 gain, you got to have that knee-jerk reaction and say, do we have a look back? And indeed, we have a $14,000 loss, but it was 6 years ago. Aha, I just crossed it out. That was cool. So I have to try to erase that. There we go. It was 6 years ago. And because it was 6 years ago, there's no look back. And now the $12,000 gain will be a net long-term capital gain treatment, and question 14 becomes answer A. And we get everything we want out of section 1231 at that point, no limitation. Question 15 for a business, section 1231 property does not include, and this is just a basic answer, which we know from the textbook and from class. Inventory doesn't matter when it was purchased, actually, is not 1231 property. Question 16, section 1241 recapture applies to all the following except, and so here we have to just know when recapture occurs under section 1245, and here the answer is that assets sold at a loss have no recapture because it's a loss. I mean, it's just that simple. The only time you're going to recapture is when they're sold at a gain above the adjusted basis, adjusted tax basis, if you will. Because the first hours above that adjusted tax basis could have been depreciation, and that's where we have the recapture. When we get above depreciation, we go back to capital gain or section 1231, whatever it is. That's what's going on there. Number 17, a building used in a business for more than a year is sold. Ooh boy, section 1250 will not cause depreciation recapture if A, the building was placed in service after 1986, straight line depreciation was used, the building is fully depreciated. And the answer here is, and this is where maybe a little bit of the textbook was required to understand this fully, of why after 1986 is important, straight line is important, and the fact that the building is fully depreciated almost doesn't matter, but you can add that to the picture, the fact that A and B are already true. You can say the fact that even though the building is fully depreciated, there won't be depreciation recapture. And if you're not sure, again, after 1986 is the key of why there is no recapture at that point. Because section 1250 did apply, there was recapture for certain depreciation prior to that, but after that, for all intents and purposes, section 1250 doesn't come into the picture because we can only do straight line depreciation. After that, straight line depreciation doesn't cause any recapture under 1250. So we could say straight line, no recapture in the after 1986. So this was a more or less textbook type question on material covered in class, and the textbook more fully explains why there's no 1250 recapture. We're going to skip question 18 because I didn't realize it, but question 18, that is, we're going to skip because I didn't realize that that's going back to property acquired before 1986, and we're just not going to cover that in a quiz situation. If you worked it out and got it right on the exam, that's on the homework exam, that is, which is not an exam, but the homework, that is fantastic. I'm happy that you did it. Continue to do that kind of work, but it won't be on the in-class quiz. Oops, okay, so now question 19. This is a section 1031 question, tax-free exchange. And we're going to see whether or not we have a 1031. That's the concept here. Some people asked me some of these questions and said, looks like we got boot issues, but none of these questions really involved any real detailed analysis of boot, which was beyond the scope of the class. I think we're going to be okay here. Let's see, we've got a ranch. We have to ask ourselves a few questions. Again, the textbook probably needs to fill in some of the details of what was not said in class. So, which is, do we have like-kind property? This is a ranch. Let's get a little bit fancy here. All right, let's see. Let's do the following. New colors. We have a ranch in Wyoming, and they're going to sell the ranch to buy an apartment complex. The ranch is probably of an investment or business nature. And certainly the apartment complex is certainly of a business or investment nature. And in property, That's enough to make it like kind. Property is a very broad definition. And when I say property, real property, very broad definition. And so we have enough to say there's a like kind property here. That's great. Now let's see what happens next. I take a drink, that's what's next. Very good. The complex is available for sale. B purchased the apartment complex in Louisiana from C and transfers it to A in exchange for A's ranch. All right, so in A's hands, here's what we've got. In A's hands, we have land, or let's call it investment grade property, business or investment grade. Reason being is that's how he's held it. Go back, A had this ranch. What B does is B acts like an intermediary. He buys the apartment from C, and he transfers it to A in exchange for A's ranch. Each of them have a fair market value of $1 million, so it looks like we have a fair market value exchange, no problem. And the answer now is that B, his holding of the property was not business or investment. He was just holding it for purposes of the exchange. So B does not have a like-kind exchange because he didn't hold the property in any business manner. He just held the property as sort of an intermediary here. And the result for B is, if you look at B's result, he doesn't have a taxable problem because he bought it for $1 million and he, quote, sold it for $1 million. So he doesn't have a tax transaction that causes tax, but he has a taxable event should he have had gain, which he doesn't. The result is the answer is going to be B, because since the property was not in the hands of B long enough to be considered business or investment property, it's not a like-kind exchange from B's standpoint, but it is from A. So this problem was to teach you about A versus B. A did hold the property for business or investment use. This is real property. B held it for this, just a transaction. That's not considered holding it for business or investment use. And for B, it almost looks like inventory. I think that's what you might have to conclude. B bought it for sale to A. If B had bought it from C for less than the fair market value and then traded it to A, B would have a recognized gain. So if B were able to buy it from C for a bargain purchase of $900,000, then he would have had a $100,000 gain on the transfer to A, because B really had it as inventory. That's the best way to conclude that problem. Problem 20. Landry exchanged land with an adjusted basis of $50,000 for another parcel of land worth $35,000 plus 10. Landry held the original land for investment purposes, so that's good. Means that we do have first part of our question, whether we have a like-kind exchange or not. We've got property held for that investment or business purpose. Now, he's exchanging it. His value is $35,000, and he's giving $10,000, or rather, the value of the property that he's getting is $35,000 plus 10 in cash. Well, that makes $45,000. So if you look at it, if his adjusted basis is 50, and he's exchanging it for a property worth $35,000 plus giving $10,000, then maybe his fair market value of his property is really only worth $45,000. So what happens in this event? Do we have a loss? Well, potentially, but the fact that he was willing to exchange it, even though the problem tells you the value is 35 plus 10, meaning 45, even though the problem tells you that, the fact that he was willing to exchange it for his property must mean that his property is still worth is worth $45,000. He probably has a loss, but it's a like kind of exchange, and no gain or loss is recognized in a like kind exchange if it works. And so the answer is D, 0. There's no recognition of loss in this like kind exchange. Now, the basis in the property that Landry will have in the new property will be a carryover basis of 50 plus 10, and thus he'll have a basis of 60,000. That's a bad 60. Let's make that better. He'll have a basis of 60. That proves that if he were to sell it for 45, he would then recognize the loss of $15,000, which is what you would expect when he came in with a basis of 50 and he put another 10 down. So if he already had a $5,000 loss built into the 50, because the value of what he's getting is only worth 45, that's 5, but he gave another 10, so he really should have a $15,000 loss. And so it's preserved by the new basis in the new property of 60, in case you were worried about Landry here in this situation. In a non-taxable exchange, Henry traded in a truck having an $8,500 basis and a fair market value of 10, the new truck having a fair market value of 15. Henry paid cash of 5 along with the trade-in. What's Henry's basis in the new truck? Well, we know his adjusted basis was 85, so we start there. We add the 5, we get 13.5. That should be the new basis that he has. That's answer A, which indeed is the correct answer. And again, the proof is that should Henry have sold his truck for the fair market value of 10, he would have had a $1,500 loss. Gain. He would have sold it for 10. He would have had 8,500 basis, a $1,500 gain. Here, he's trading for a truck, and notice, by the way, that, which I didn't point out, that it is a like-kind exchange because it's a truck for a truck. Remember, the definition on personal property from the textbook you will see is very narrow. It's got to be very, very similar, and truck for a truck is certainly meeting that definition. Truck for equipment used in, say, a warehouse would probably not be like kind, but truck for a truck is good. But here, the new basis would be 13.5, and the proof is if he sold the new truck that he received for 15, its fair market value, he would have a $1,500 gain. So that proves that this carryover basis, this new adjusted basis for the new truck, must work because it preserves the $1,500 gain that he has avoided in the like-kind exchange. Laurie owns land held for investment. Now we're on problem 22. The land is 150. Laurie's basis in the land is 130. There's a $20,000 gain locked in there. 20,000 K gain. Laurie exchanges the land plus 20,000 of cash for a warehouse owned by Trey. Trey's warehouse is worth 210, but it has a mortgage of 40. Laurie's going to assume the mortgage. Trey's basis in the warehouse is 120. Well, I don't think we care about Trey's basis because we're only asked the question of what's Laurie's basis in the warehouse that she's going to receive. That's all we're being asked. And now we have to just see the result of the exchange. Now, is it a like-kind exchange? What's land held for investment? And it's land. So now we know we've got a like-kind exchange, or I should say it's land for a warehouse, but that's close enough in real property. Land for a warehouse is still considered a like-kind, and we're good to go with a like-kind exchange under Section 1031. So what is it that Laurie's getting from Trey from his warehouse? All right, so what we've got is we've got a $210,000 fair market value minus the $40,000 mortgage. So that's 170. That's the value of the property in the exchange. That's the net fair market value of the property because it's subject to the mortgage. Laurie's property is worth 150. In order to get that, Laurie has to cough up an extra 20 to get to the 170 of the value of Trey's property. So we've got 20 here that's going to add to the basis. Laurie's carryover basis is 130, so now we're already up to 150. But the truth of the matter is, as we learned in property acquisitions, the value of assuming the mortgage is really like it's the same as cash. The value of assuming a mortgage is the same as cash. So adding to the adjusted basis is the 40. 40 plus the 150 is the 190, and that's the correct answer there. Which of the following partnerships can elect the cash basis? This goes as a throwback question, just as a review. And here the answer was C. Remember, personal service. Got to get that straight. Okay. Personal service has unlimited exception to the accrual basis rule. And that's why answer C. The installment method may be used, and this is back to one topic. The installment method may be used for all kinds of sale property with the exception of, and this is just something we had to learn. It was on the slides in the textbook. Marketable securities is the exception. Everything else qualifies. Inventory does not, so keep that in mind. Kyle sold land on the installment basis for $100,000. His basis in the land was $70,000. So this is a computational question on installment sales, and what we need to figure out is what is the gross profit. So let's see what the deal is. He's selling it for, and we might as well do the following. Let's do the following. All right, let's see what we got here. All right, oh cool, new ink. We have a sale for $100,000. The basis is 70, and this goes back to typical acquisition and gain and loss computations. There's a commission. Don't forget the commission. That's $6,000. So the gain on this sale would be $24,000. That's going to be a gain. This is basis, adjusted tax cost basis. This is the selling expense. And this is the gross profit. What's the gross profit percentage? 24%. So for every dollar on the installment sale, 24% will be recognized as received. They received as a down payment $40,000. If you do the math, 24% of that turns out to be, well, just do the math. Don't worry about having to make a percentage sign. 24% of $40,000 turns out to be $9,600. Answer A, and we're done. Email me any questions for further explanation.